On a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, we're looking at the 3 stars of round 1 for the Carolina Hurricanes and why Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, and Frederik Andersen deserve these recognitions.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surge Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fantastic Friday edition of the pod. As like we said at the start, we're looking at the 3 stars of round 1 for the Hurricanes and why I think Sebastian Aho, Svechnikov, and Andersen were pretty much the 3 most prominent Hurricanes in their round 1 victory against the New Jersey Devils. But before we jump into all that, this episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now, like I said, the Hurricanes are moving on to round 2. We know I can play in the Washington Capitals. Still waiting on when game 1 is going to be. Of course, it's going to be in Washington since the Capitals won the division. So Hurricanes will start on the road. But before we jump into anything that is related to that matchup, which stick for next week, and we will be doing a preview with the host of Locked On Capitals, talking about that round 2 matchup. But for this episode, we're going to be looking at the 3 guys who are very prominent for the Canes in round 1. Now, quick honorable mentions, like guys like Seth Jarvis, Taylor Hall, Logan Stacom. Those guys really showed out well. Jacob Slavin, Jordan Martin, all those guys definitely deserve some honorable mentions. But we're going to do this. We're talking about the 3 guys who I think definitely were just a little bit more to help the Hurricanes win. And usually, you go 3 stars to 1 star. But for this one, we're going with the most prominent first star to second to third, just kind of, looking at the guys and what they've done. But really kick it off with the guy who I thought really stepped up for the Hurricanes in this one, and that's Sebastian Aho. Now, in round 1, he did finish with 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points, 3 power play goals, which is absolutely insane for the fact that the 3 of the 6 that the Hurricanes had in round 1 were all by Sebastian Aho. And of course, the last one being the game-winning goal and the overtime goal to have them win 5-4 in double overtime to move on to round 2. And that's for Sebastian Aho. That's what you want out of your face of the franchise, number 1 guy. I know we talked about, Seth Jarvis kind of was basically the team MVP. It was voted on by the Professional Hockey Writers chapter of Carolina, saying that Jarvis was the team MVP, which I completely still believe that is the case. But if you're looking at a guy like Aho, who's, been the more prominent guy for the franchise over the last few years, that's the performance that you want in a round 1 for Aho. And like I said, you're looking at a guy who scored 2 massive goals in game 5 to, like I said, you tied up 4-4, and then you go in double overtime and win at 5-4. That's something that really stands out for the fact that his 2 goals in the game were both power play goals. Of course, the other one he scored in was the other double overtime game in game 3 where him and Seth Jarvis scored in the third period to tie it to force into overtime. So you're talking within the last 3 games, 3 and game 5. That's where Aho really showed out. And his 3 goals of the series were all power play goals, which you definitely need in, like I said, the last 2 being a 4-4 tie and the 5-4 winner. But even then, too, you look at like what Aho did. He had, he was a +1, so, definitely a tough series for a lot of the top line guys. We're looking at, -1s and stuff like that. But for Jarvis, but Blake was a +2. But the fact that Aho went out there, leads the team in assists with 5, 8 points. He's second on the team in goals. That's what you're looking for in one of your guys that you really want to stand out. And that's what he did. He took a little bit to get to the goals in game 3, but really showed out in game 5. But that's where you're looking for those clutch moments. And that's who Sebastian Aho is. He is a clutch player. Like even this season, You're talking 9 game-winning goals this year, 5 goals in overtime. The 5 goals in overtime are the most of his entire career. Like the other best he's had is like 3 back in 18-19. And even game winners. This is the 3rd season where he's had 9 game-winning goals, stretching back to 21-22, and then last season he had 10. Talk about 64 game winners for Sebastian Aho in his career and 16 overtime goals. That's how clutch he is in those moments. And then if you look at just even the playoffs too, he's got 6 game-winning goals in the playoffs for his career, and he's got 2 overtime goals. That's the type of dominance that you look for out of a guy like Aho in those type of clutch moments. And I think that's why, for me, he is the first star for the Hurricanes in round 1, because you need those clutch moments, especially in these especially in games like this where you're in overtime. Who's the guy you want the puck on the stick? And yeah, you can go with Svech. You can definitely go with Sebastian, or you can go with Seth Jarvis. Jarvis is definitely a guy who's got a lot of game winners, especially last year. He had some this year. I mean, there's a bunch of guys you're like, okay, if you need a puck on the stick, who's that guy? Aho, Svech, Jarvis. I mean, even like Blake and Hall this year. Jackson Blake had a ton of game winners. So there's a good number of guys that you could look to and be like, all right, here's your game winner. But even more so in those clutch overtime moments, like, yeah, Marty Nietzsche's last year and even part of this year was another clutch OT guy. But the guy who's like, if you think of someone who's going to get it done in overtime, usually it's Fish. He's just somehow he's programmed to be the clutch goal scorer that you need in certain moments. And that's what it was. Like I said, there's a ton of guys who could have gotten first start. Like Frederik Andersen could have gotten it. Andrei could have gotten it. Seth, whoever. There's a bunch of guys who could have gotten first start. But if you look at what Aho did, coming in the clutch, especially in Game 5, where he scored 2 power play goals, which as a whole team, like that was one of the things that you were looking at coming into the playoffs. Could their power play get rolling? And they scored 6 out of 19 chances to go 31%. And half of those 6 power play goals were all from Aho. That's the definition of a guy being clutch in the right moment with you. You're on the man advantage. And the fact that you did it in a wild Game 5 where you came back down from 3-0 to tie it. You go back down. You immediately tie it again in the second period. Then it takes double overtime where you get a 4-minute power play to Jesperi Kotkaniemi taking a stick to pretty much the eyebrow and the eye, and then he scores it then. For me, that is so clutch in the moment where the place is loud. You're in a situation where it's like, do you want to go back to Newark for Game 6? No one really wants to do that. And the fact that he put himself in the good spot, great pass from Gostisbehere, put it right on the net. Like you just knew that was going in when you see the certain angles of how he scored that goal, you just knew it was going in. But that's the guy you want to have do that. And that's why for me, Aho was the number 1 star for the Hurricanes in round 1. And that even despite the fact that his 3 goals came in, Game 3 and Game 5, he was still someone who, after Game 1 where he kind of had a point, went past that and was able to get 8 points in round 1. If you look at other performances in the playoffs, so you see like McDavid or a McKinnon or all these guys who are getting like 15, 20 points, or more, even closer to 30, you need dominant rounds, even early on. And the fact that Aho's already at 8 after 5 games, that is a really good start to your playoff campaign. I think that's just that. And the fact that he scored half of the team's power play goals and he scored an overtime winner again. It just goes to show that clutch moments bring out the best, and that's especially when you talk about Sebastian Aho. So, like I said, I think for me, that's why he's the number 1 star for the Carolina Hurricanes when you come to talk about round 1. Like I said, there's a bunch of guys who could have gotten it, but just for what he's done, it's kind of almost like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, if you're talking about someone who really dialed in when the Canes needed it most, especially in Game 5, Aho is definitely that one. But also, too, the guy you're talking about for the second star, he easily could have gotten as well with his hat trick in Game 4 and the fact that he scored again in Game 5 as well. That's where my number 2 star could have easily been the number 1 star as well if it just wasn't for what Sebastian Aho did in overtime and him scoring half the power play goals. So that being said, let's talk about Andrei Svechnikov, why I think he is my second star for the Hurricanes. So stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Avowed, Angel 25, you name it. As easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, which is second gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, which is first and second gen, and then the Fire TV Cube, which is the third gen. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And like I said at the end of segment 1, Andrei Svechnikov could have been the first star for the Hurricanes in round 1. Very big moments for him in the series where you look at Game 4, where he gets the hat trick. You know, you've been waiting for him pretty much most of the season, and even the first couple games of the playoffs. You're like, we are waiting for Andrei Svechnikov to have that dominant game, that take control game. And you saw in the regular season with Rod Brennan where he said, like, you know, we're trying to find a way to get him going. He's first line, second line, you know, pretty much all up and down the roster trying to get him rolling. And you could definitely tell this was a down year for Svech overall in terms of just looking at a regular season standpoint for him, which, I mean, you know, it's definitely, you know, a tough year where you're having to come back from, you know, dealing with everything that he did, you know, in the 22-23 season. You know, he got hurt, came back, got hurt a few times in 23-24, you know, a -8, only 48 points, 20 goals. Like, you're looking at a guy who could score 25 or 30 goals, easily having over 50, closer to 60 points, you know. It's just, you know, but he did have 10 power play goals out of his 20, so he did score half of his goals there. Did have a lot of empty netters, you know, but even had 2 game-winning goals. Like, so, like, Andrei Svechnikov knows how to score. It's just, it was definitely not the year that he was hoping for. But then you look at round 1, 6 points on the team, second behind Sebastian Aho, does lead the team with 5 goals, you know, is in the top 3 in terms of, you know, power, you know, goals in the first round. And the fact that he also has a game winner and a power play goal as well on top of that. And he's shooting at 22.7%. That is really good if you're Andrei Svechnikov, and that's what you really were hoping for if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, because now he sits at 6 points. He's a +3, got one of the power play goals, got a game winner. You know, second, like I said, second in points, first on the team in goals, and that's what I think for me, if it wasn't for Sebastian Aho's 3 power play goals and him scoring 2 of those in Game 5 to help the Hurricanes advance, I think you could make an argument for Andrei to get the first star of the Hurricanes in round 1. But even then, for the way he dominated Game 4 and really, you know, scored again in Game 5, like, he scored 4 of his 5 goals in the last 2 games. And, you know, the hat trick goal was an empty netter, but that's just how good he is. Like, if you're an empty net and Andrei Svechnikov is on the ice, you are definitely worried of him scoring goals, and that's what he is. And yeah, in Game 1, he scored an empty netter, basically iced the game there. I mean, that's what Andrei's good at. He can score a lot of empty netters. Like, hey, you know, you look at Alexander Ovechkin. He scored a lot of empty netters too. So, I mean, they don't ask how, they ask how many. So even regardless if that's how he mostly scores, but he even scored on Jacob Markstrom. Like I said, out of his 5, 3 of them were with him in the net. And that was especially when you look at how he did it in Game 4, where he scores 2 there. And then he scores the game-tying goal for the first tie at 3-3 in the second period to cap off the comeback where you're down 3-0. You get goals from Hall. You know, Blake makes it. You know, he scores the second, then Andrei ties it 3-3. So even then, like, we've been waiting for Andrei to have a dominant game, be the guy where he can step up and just impose his will, and he did that the whole first round. Like I said, the crazy part too is he had no penalty minutes this first round. Like usually it's like, all right, death taxes, Andrei Svechnikov gets called for breathing or just being a more physical guy, but the hits are clean. It's just they want to call him for it. But he had 0 penalty minutes at round 1. And that's with all the craziness of Markstrom slashing him. You know, you got guys who are trying to go after try to coat the Canes into scrums. Andre was part of none of it. He kind of just kept his composure, and he kept himself available for Rod Brind'Amour, and that's something that's really huge for a guy who usually gets called for pretty much everything. So you look at what Andre did of your best ability is your availability, and that's what he was in round 1 for the Kings. Never went to the box, was always available for the power play, always available when Rod needed, a guy. And him playing on that first line with Aho and Blake, that was a very good move, and I think that's what really helped the Hurricanes out, and especially later on in the series in games 4 and 5, where he scores the hat trick at 4. The first game is with those two guys, and then in game 5, he scores another one, and that's on top of Blake scoring too. So that line of Svech, Aho, Blake is a very good one for the Hurricanes. And then you can put Jarvis on another line where he can do his thing as well. And I think that's where for Andre, that you put him in a good spot to be with a facilitator like Aho and another guy who score like Blake. So you have 3 guys who can put the puck in the net and be facilitators and play their roles of, Blake being the scrappy young guy who's going to go in there, Aho's a facilitator, and then Svech is the power forward who can throw the body and score goals. And that's what you saw in 4 and in 5. Like I said, if it wasn't for Aho's wonder class all-out game 5 performance and, just locking the points and all that, you could say, hey, Andrei Svechnikov was that dude in round 1, especially after game 4 and game 5. So it's very close. It's definitely a toss-up for a debate of like who's the first star, who was the second star, but you have to give Andre so much of his flowers for what he did against the Devils. Like I said, to be able to keep your availability that airtight to where whenever you're needed on, you were there for, because you weren't in the box, you weren't taking unnecessary penalties, you weren't, you weren't struggling. Like he played all 5 games, even if he was off the score sheet for a couple of them. He was so prominent. Like you can tell he was making plays. It's just maybe the puck wasn't going in, or he was setting up his teammates, but he was still able to impose his will physically in a way that wasn't going to get him in trouble. And I think that's so underrated for what he did. Yeah, the 5 goals are great. Yeah, he got the hat trick, but I think the way he played overall definitely showed that, okay, Andrei Svechnikov has hit another level, and he's hit it at the right time to where, Trip Tracy said it, and Jordan Martinook and all those guys have been saying it. Like, we need you to hit that next level to help us get farther. And that's the thing where you look at round 1, that this could be the springboard for an Andrei Svechnikov breakout playoff performance where, yeah, he's had some good playoffs, but this could be the one where it's like, oh, the Hurricanes need guys to hit that next level to get them over the hump to continue their play. For Andre, this is that game. This was that series to where it's like, oh my goodness, he might have unlocked the next level to help the Hurricanes get over that hump. And now you're looking at round 2 going, can he progress more into his game and to help them get past the Capitals? Because, a lot of people are going to be looking at this series being like, it might be a toss-up, but the Capitals were, the second best team in the NHL and all that, which we'll preview more with the Locked On Capitals, next week. But this is where you're looking at Andre going, this could be it. This could be the Andrei Svechnikov that we've been waiting for to, like, he's good, but here's that next gear. Here's that next level. I think this is that series that kind of did it for him. So, like I said, you could say Andrei Svechnikov could have been a first star, but the way he's been playing right now is so great. And it's just, you have to tip your hat to him having a phenomenal round 1, and you only hope it just keeps going here in the 2025 playoffs. Now, for the third star, like I said, there's a bunch of guys who could have gotten this one too, but I think if you're looking at someone who could have easily put his name in for first or second star as well, is Frederik Andersen. And yeah, he got hurt in game 4, but even then, I think that his performances warrants him to be the third star. So we'll talk about Mr. Andersen here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else, especially in Carolina, where the Lenovo Center is absolutely rocking. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 2, if he didn't get hurt in game 4, I think Frederik Andersen could have easily gotten the first star for the Hurricanes because he was on a dominant masterclass to start off the series. I mean, you're looking at a guy who had an over a .960 save percentage, gave up 1 goal in the first 2 games each of the first round, where he gave up 1 goal in game 1, 1 goal in game 2. Kind of not a great third game, but still kept the Hurricanes in it to where they, just only lost 3-2, but it's one of those things where he was dominant in that game as well. It's just unfortunately, double overtime, you lose 3-2. But even then, Frederik Andersen had a really solid first round with the Canes until, unfortunately, like I said, he got hurt in game 4. At that point, he'll give up 1 goal as well. But if you look at just the performance he put on, I mean, you're looking at him he did get the win in game 4, so that at least worked out. But you're talking about Frederik Andersen went 3-1 in his 4 starts, a 1.59 goals against average, and a .936 save. That's really, really good for a guy who, played in 226 minutes and 28 seconds for the Hurricanes in round 1. And you look at the playoff performance that Freddie's put in for the Hurricanes as of late, and you could look back into last playoffs being like, yeah, he was overworked. He played 10 games. He went 6-4. Save percentage was under 900. Goals against was over 2.5. But if you look at his 2 out of the 3 playoffs so far, he's had a sub 2 goals against, and he's had over a plus 900 save percentage. Back in the 22-23 season, where he went 5-3 in 9 games, had a 183 goals against and a 927 save percentage. This year, yeah, it's only been 4 starts, but you're still talking a 159 goals against and a 936 save percentage. That's really, really good. And if you remember the article I put out a few weeks back on the Hockey Writers, talking about, if you're looking at a season where he's had like around a 1.4, like a sub 1.5 goals against, and an over 940 save percentage, was back in the 2015-16 season when he was with the Anaheim Ducks, where in his 5 starts there, he went 3-2, had a 141 goals against and a 947 save percentage. So he's still relatively within range that if he has a good second round, you could easily see him put that number back down. Of course, he will play, right around the same amount of games. Of course, 15-16 was a round 1 compared to just, 1 round in this playoff. But even then, you give him another start where he puts a performance in where he gives up maybe 1 goal and saves a lot of shots, then you look at him being back closer to the 140s again and over a 940 save percentage. That's a dominant performance that you want to see out of a goalie like Frederik Andersen. And he has pretty much done that for the most part. Yeah, the first season where he was in Carolina, gets hurt with like 2 weeks before the playoffs. He misses that in his first year. But then, like I said, you talked 2 seasons ago, he had a great playoff. It just didn't really work out for the Hurricanes, with the fact of, you got bounced by the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference Final, and, Bobrovsky was on a world-beating tour. But even then, Freddie played so good in the Eastern Conference Final. Like, they only lost by 1 goal every game in that series. And even last year, he got a little bit overworked, but that's not really his fault. It's just the power play wasn't really rolling and a whole bunch of other stuff. But then you look at just how this team played in this, type of environment and so far in these playoffs. And it's like you're kind of seeing him being that really good goalie that you had 2 seasons ago for the Eastern Conference final run. And I know as of Friday morning, he is going to be fully participating with the Hurricanes in practice. So there's a good indication that he could be ready to go, hopefully for round 2. And if that's the case, Piotr did play well in the relief. He only gave up 1 goal in Game 4. Game 5 was very wonky, not just for him, but I think the whole team in front of him. I wouldn't even put really a lot of those goals in Game 5 against Kochetkov just because he was kind of left out to dry for the most part. But even then, he still played pretty dominant, or not dominant, but he played really well. But if you have Andersen ready to go for round 2, I could definitely see Rod and the Hurricanes going like, hey, you were shutting the door for us in basically the first 3.5 games before getting taken out in Game 4. This could be where if Andersen's ready to go, that's where you look at his first round performance and be like, hey, he was, like I said, barely above a 1.51 goals against. His save percentage was .937. He was a brick wall for the Canes, and I think that's why you're going to be looking at possibly the Great Dane being that guy for the Hurricanes in net for round 2 if he's 100% ready to go. So with him being fully back at practice, because it was kind of like an optional day for Thursday, he was there with a few guys, but he's fully participating on Friday's practice. So if he comes in there, he's good to go and is fully ready for round 2 against Washington whenever that series starts next week. That's where you can be like, okay, it's going to be Andersen's net, because you can't look at round 1 and be like, well, he got hurt. Is he fully ready to go? Maybe we give him an extra day rest. Now, like if he's ready to go, because you even heard him say for Game 4, I want the net after a double overtime loss in Game 3. He wanted that start in Game 4. That's what you love to see. So I think if he's 100% ready to go, you could definitely look at Andersen being like, no, I want in. Let's do this. So even despite being knocked out of Game 4, didn't really play Game 5, I still think Andersen did so much for the Canes because he kept him in Game 2, kept him in Game 3, and was doing pretty solid in Game 4. I think that's where you look at those games, like, yeah, maybe he lost that Game 3 in double overtime, but he was, lights out in that game. And like I said, he stood on his brain and skull in Game 2 to help the Hurricanes preserve that 3-1 win, because most of that game was 2-1, and they were down after the first and came back in the second and held it out for the rest of the way. And even a dominant performance in Game 1 where you win 4-1, but he was making a lot of key saves. That's where you're like, you have to go back to him. And that's why after a round 1 like that, that's why Andersen is a, third star at least. Like I said, if he didn't get taken out of Game 4 and just gave up 1 goal again, and then depending on how Game 5 goes, that's why for me, like, despite being knocked out early, he still did enough to get that third star. Now, if we look at round 2 and see, okay, what are the third stars of round 2 could look like, I would not be surprised if you see Frederik Andersen back on this list again for round 2 if we get another solid performance for him out of this one. So in the comments, let me know, who were your 3 stars of round 1 for the Carolina Hurricanes? Because for me, first star, Sebastian Aho. Second star, Andrei Svechnikov. Third star, Frederik Andersen. But let me know, do you agree? Do you have a different 3 stars for the Canes? So if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments. Or if you're on socials, let me know at Locked On Hurricanes. Or you can tag me at OneTrueZach. But I'm very interested to see what everyone thinks about their 3 stars. But these are mine. I think these ones are, you can go any way with how these break up. But these were my 3 stars for the Carolina Hurricanes in round 1. But guys, this will be a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen of the day. For your second listen, well, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can check out my links to find all my written content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, well, it's the Searchcast and all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, well, we're on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen. Make sure to follow, leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to me know if you like the show as well. Share with all other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But I hope everyone enjoyed this Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and until next time, as always, let's go Canes.